Thank you all for coming out this evening. My name is Oeding. I'm one of the co-hosts of this event. I'm the manager of Little Red Hand Ranch. I have garden produce and chickens. Many thanks also to Sam and New Public Library. After each presentation, we will have a short question and answer, and depending upon how long we take to get through the end of it, we'll probably have time at that end too. We've got quite a few, I understand, online on Zoom and streaming at home. It's a great online feature we have here at the library. Let's move to next page. Marcy Morawski Renolette.
Oh, the next email. Oh, the email. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you wanted that on the.
You got it.
That's in my email, right? Okay.
Well, Marcy Morawski Renolette was scheduled to be one of our speakers. She's unable to be here. She's asked me to read a statement, and then we'll go right into my presentation. So bear with me. From the gardening group, Newton, Kansas, this is her Facebook page that she established in just in the last few years. Starts off.
Sorry, I didn't get this on the slideshow. If you want it on the screen, here I'm doing a rough and ready solution here. Yes. Well, that didn't work. Let me see. Okay, well, here's that sort of works. There. Now we can read along on the screen. Did you want to read it out loud, Norm? Or?
Yeah, I'll read it. Starting right up here. I focus on vegetable gardening, but there are others in the group who are very knowledgeable about flower gardens and houseplants. I'd love to see the group be more interactive by sharing our successes and challenges, sharing seeds, extra produce, etc. Please post your experience and or questions. The way she has this all set up on her Facebook page, she gets a lot of questions, and someone on that Facebook page will weigh in with an answer. Continuing, I try to keep the site evidence-based, often reference our local and state extension offices and their resources. Last year had its challenges with what seemed like a year's worth of rain coming in 1 week, early heat waves and late cold spells. Each of these challenges brings on new challenges in the form of pests, disease, etc. It's important to identify the pest and disease before looking for solutions. This is another area where evidence-based solutions are helpful. Example, blossom end rot is rarely an issue of too little calcium in our soil. It's usually due to inconsistent watering / rain or root damage, which prevents the uptake of calcium in the soil. Adding eggshells, etc. isn't going to fix the problem. Usually correcting what variables you can in time will correct the problem. It's a good idea to identify the insects you find. For example, ladybug larvae look nothing like an adult ladybug. Ladybugs are beneficial, and without proper identification, it's easy to kill good bugs. Every year I remind myself gardening is not a competition. Sometimes those with most experience in fancy gardens will have poor results, while first timers and those who just throw some seeds out can't keep up with their produce. Let's encourage each other, share our stories, find joy in digging in the dirt and learning something new, and take advantage of all the benefits we get from the soil and being outside. And it's signed, Marcy. A lot of great information. Okay, now the slide on the rainfall.
Okay, let's get back to where do the slideshow? There we go.
I'm fairly religious about writing down how much it rains. Over here, late 2021, we went 5 months of under average rainfall. It's a very dry winter a year ago. It was a lot of stress on the wheat, and I'd like to add that there's actually an upside for the wheat as it tends to create a better protein in the wheat crop. So we had about an average March and then a dry April. And then from May, June, and the first 2 days of July, we had 18 inches of rain. Did the fall corrupt on you?
Well, I kind of reformatted it to fit on it. So is that right? July 1st and 2nd, you had 2 inches, and then July 3rd, you had a.
This line here should be down here. From the remainder of July, August, to September, we had a total of just over 3 inches.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then in November, we had about average rainfall. And I think we need to scroll.
No, that's, sorry, the December is hidden behind the little, let me move this up to the top.
Okay, well, in December, we had 4/10. And this month of January 2023, I had 1.25 inches. We typically only get about 1 inch of rain December, January, February. Right now, starting since last November, we're right at average. That's really kind of a good sign, I hope. It's still dry in a lot of places. Next slide.
There you go.
This is a copy of our latest drought monitor. It's easy to find online. It's educational, it's fun. You can see how others around the country are doing. It's updated every week. The darker the color is the worse the drought. And right now it's centered right over the major wheat producing area of Kansas. And this little squiggly line is the Ark River. Up here is Great Bend, and somewhere down here is Wichita. So we're just north of here. And it's still dry for a lot of people. People need rain worse than we do. There's also an archive when you go to hunt this page down. If you ever want to talk about how dry it was 10 years ago, the archives can show you a picture of how dry it was. A lot of other local impacts would include wheat, cattle, crops. We can only hope that the cattlemen get enough moisture to replenish the water reserves for the cattle pastures. All the crops are going to need soil moisture, and of course, those of us that garden, we hate to use the city water. It costs us extra. And a special note, Kansas wheat crop was about 1 full point better in protein content this past year. That's really good news. Next slide. Last March, I saw an owl. He was coming to visit me. I turn out all the lights about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, like I usually do, and I look out the window and I see this owl. So I decided I'm going to put out a trail cam so I can take a picture and prove it. And about 3 days later, I get this picture. There was no picture of that owl arriving or departing. Guess who's sitting in the background here? Newton Police Department patrol car at 3 a.m. is out patrolling our neighborhood. And that's what tripped the camera.
Mm-hmm.
There is hope. If you're attracting wildlife to your residence or garden, whatever, That's probably a good sign, maybe fewer chemicals. At that particular time, I had a lot of rabbits, and I distinctly remember there were fewer rabbits shortly afterwards. So I think the owl is feasting on rabbits. I happen to like rabbits, but hey, there'll always be rabbits. And yeah, if you can get wildlife to come visit you, that's a good sign. Maybe there's less chemical contamination. Something's working, and if something's working for you, you just keep doing it. Next one. Next slide. Somebody know what this is? For those that would like to know what it is, raise your hand. Aha. If you've never seen one of these, that is a baby ladybug. And they're usually about as long as my little fingernail. The technical term is ladybug larva. The best thing about these guys is they have no wings. They have a ravenous appetite. They love aphids. They will mature into adults and hopefully lay more eggs in that neighborhood before they fly away. Ladybugs are kind of like owls. Improved habitat, fewer chemicals, host plants and trees. Next slide. This is my backyard. I've got a garden hoop. In the summer, that plastic's off. I use it for the cucumbers and cherry tomatoes and squash, climbing spinach. Over here is my chicken coop. I basically have a small micro farm. And I've cut my mowing down by about a third. Next slide. Here are the chickens, a better shot of the chicken coop. That's all built to city code. Next slide. I've got spinach growing inside my garden hoop. In a week or two, I'm going to have fresh spinach. This is what I do. Are there any questions before we move on to the next presenter? Yes, sir.
Do you have auxiliary heat in your greenhouse?
No, I do not.
Powered over.
I was mentioning earlier that brutal cold snap we had before Christmas. It got down to 10 in the hoop. On a 50 or 60 degree day, it'll be up to 80 or 90 degrees in the hoop. If I'm paying real close attention on a warm day, I'll open the door so it doesn't get too hot. Be real careful about keeping everything watered that's in there. I felt real fortunate that the spinach survived that 10-degree weather, but it works. Whether it's a hoop similar to that or more of a greenhouse or a cold frame, there are ways to grow food during the winter. Any other questions?
You move the chicken coop around?
Excuse me?
Does the chicken coop move?
The chicken coop does move. That reminds me, the coop has a hot water heater during the winter. Even though it is movable, I park it during the winter so I can keep it plugged in for the hot water. There's very little winter growth, winter annuals in the lawn. But once it warms up, I'll start moving it around and then basically rotation and pasture grazing for the chickens. Other questions? Do we have any questions online?
No, not at the moment, but everybody be aware that you can type in the chat or the Q&A and I will see your questions and pose them to the presenters.
Okay, our next presenter is Kurt Lawrence. He's the creator and administrator of Kansas Pollinator Friendly Gardens. And he just did this about a year ago and he's having great success online on Facebook.
Well, I'm not a public speaker, so bear with me. I'm, like I told Norm, I'm hoping my passion for what I'm doing will carry me through here. Get my notes here. Norm said, my name's Kurt Lawrence. I live here in Newton. One little note, your chickens, you have to thank me actually for being able to have chickens in Newton.
Thank you.
Back in '86, I bought a place over on the edge of town. It was still in the city limits over on East 9th, right before the interstate. And I had a barn and a silo and next to the house. And I just assumed, so I got chickens and ducks and geese and it wasn't long that the animal control guy was at my door and, well, you can't have, I had like 3 acres and so I had to go around town and I got like over 1,000 signatures. I went before the city council and the mayor and so it's been since '86. You know, when I see it makes me feel good when I see others having chickens now. Yeah. Well, on to my talk here. As Norm said, I'm administrator of the Kansas Pollinator Friendly Gardeners. It's kind of grown out of, I started a gardening site, I felt there was a need for another site and it's kind of molded into that, the pollinator aspect of it. And so I invite you to come check it out. We try to encourage people with that type of gardening. Now back on to my own little story here. I started out back in the '80s. I worked for Stutzman's over in Hutch. I was one of their 3 growers, and I learned a lot about plants during that time. But I also that kind of made me aware of chemicals and the hazards of it. Nothing against Stutzman's or anything, but that's just part of the game when you're in a large operation like that. And that's what made me change professions. I was a mailman then for 30-some years here in town. I retired a few years ago, and now it's allowed me to kind of focus more on my gardening. Along with like Marcy, I was a big vegetable gardener for years and years. And our current house, the backyard was where I had the vegetable garden, and it just got so shady over time that I had to make the move to have it up in front. And I guess at that point, I've always had a interest in tropicals and cactus. I never imagined that they could actually grow outside in Kansas, but I learned that it is possible with some of the varieties with minimal and others with pretty heavy duty protection. But what would have been my vegetable patch, now my tropical and cactus patch. But I do have probably half of my area up front is devoted to the pollinator yard. And that's what my talk Norm wanted to be, to share about shrinking the garden. And like you said, I don't have a single blade of grass at my place. My backyard, I've kind of let it. When I moved up front, I had still a lot of flowers, coneflowers and linaria, black-eyed Susans, and they've all just kind of naturalized back there. Have violets growing back there that have just come from, I don't know where, they've just naturalized. My front, I've just tried to little by little. I initially made the mistake of going to Walmart and just getting the wildflower seed pack, and that is it. For one thing, it has a lot of invasive plants that just want to take over, and you just they're not native to our area, a lot of them. And so I've learned to just kind of pick and choose. I go to a lot of the different places. I've learned there's a place in Stillwater, Oklahoma, Bustani Plant Farm. And they have a lot of, they specialize in plants. They're based out of Oklahoma. Basically, everything they have will be successful up here. And so I haven't been there. A lot of the folks on my site have been there, and I'm excited to go this spring. So that's one that I recommend. I had one little, it's a joke that I just recently discovered. It's a conversation between you probably most of you have heard it, but I just fell upon it just recently. It's a conversation between God and St. Francis. And bear with me here. God is talking to St. Francis. Frank, you know all about gardens and nature. What in the world is going on down there on the planet? What happened to the dandelions, violets, thistles, and stuff that I started eons ago? I had a perfect no-maintenance garden plan. Those plants grow in any type of soil, withstand drought, and multiply with abandon. The nectar from the long-lasting blossoms attract butterflies, honeybees, and flocks of songbirds. I expected to see a vast garden of color by now, but all I see are these green rectangles. St. Francis, it's the tribes that settled there, Lord, the suburbanites. They started calling your flowers weeds and went to great lengths to kill them and replace them with grass. Grass, but it's so boring. It's not colorful. It doesn't attract butterflies, birds, or bees, only grubs and sodworms. It's sensitive to temperatures. Do these suburbanites really want all that grass growing there? Apparently so, Lord. They go to great pains to grow it and keep it green. They begin each spring by fertilizing grass and poisoning any other plant that crops up in the lawn. Spring rains and warm weather probably make that grass grow really fast. That must make the suburbanites happy. Apparently not, Lord. As soon as it grows a little, they cut it, sometimes twice a week. They cut it. Do they then bale it like hay? Not exactly, Lord. Most of them rake it up and put it in bags. They bag it? Why? Is it a cash crop? Do they sell it? No, sir. It's just the opposite. They pay to throw it away. Now let me get this straight. They fertilize the grass so it'll grow. Then when it does grow, they cut it off and pay to throw it away. Yes, sir. These suburbanites must be relieved in the summer when we cut back on the rain and turn up the heat. That surely slows the growth and saves them a lot of work. You aren't going to believe this, Lord. When the grass stops growing so fast, they drag out the hoses and pay more money to water it. So they continue to mow it and pay to get rid of it. What nonsense. At least they've kept some of the trees. That was a sheer stroke of genius of mine, if I do say so myself. The trees grow leaves in the spring to provide beauty and shade in the summer. In the autumn, the leaves fall to the ground and form a natural blanket to keep moisture in the soil and protect the trees and the bushes. It's a natural cycle of life. Better sit down, Lord. Suburbanites have drawn a new circle of life. As soon as the leaves fall, they rake them up into great piles and pay to have them hauled off. No. What do they do to protect the shrub and tree roots in the winter to keep the soil moist and loose? After throwing away the leaves, they go out and buy something which they call mulch. They haul it home and spread it around in place of the leaves. And where do they get this mulch? They cut down trees and grind them up to make the mulch. That's enough. So that's, let me see here. That's a lot of where I kind of came from. Growing up, I really didn't appreciate mowing grass. And as an adult, I kind of, this endless cycle, that just grew on me. And then I can't put a finger on it, but the use of chemicals, it just never felt right to me. And my time at Stutzman's just reinforced that. And so, between Stutzman's, I'm sorry here. I'm just saying that, all this, it just knocks everything out of balance. The chemicals and the natural, like Norm was saying, you can notice the insects when there's a lack of chemicals. There's certain things, and in the 5 years I've been doing this at my place, I've little by little been building my pollinator garden up in front, and I've noticed more of the beneficial insects and the bad insects. I don't, it was hard to at first get used to seeing a plant just ravaged from hundreds of caterpillars on it, but at this point, when I see that, that actually makes me smile, because I know that in most cases, the plant will recover. Sunflowers, passion vines, they all get their share, and they all turn out to be beautiful butterflies. They're food for like 80% of the birds. That's their main food source for their young in the spring. So, if we're using the chemicals to kill the bad bugs, you're killing both the good and the bad bugs in most cases. You're taking the food away from the birds. In my garden now, with having my desert bed, I have a family of skinks that I see, running back and forth across the sidewalk from bed to bed. And, I welcome, knowing that, my little yard has become kind of like a little refuge and home to these animals, insects, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just trying to encourage, and if you don't have to go full blown like I have, but just take, and add a bed here, add a bed there, and you'll really notice the little subtle, like, I didn't notice lightning bugs for a long time. Just in the last 2 years, I've noticed a lot more lightning bugs at my place. And I know that's, I'm just being retired, I'm able to take the time I'm constantly reading and trying to learn. Lightning bugs spend the first 2 years of their life underground. You put all those chemicals, that's killing the lightning bugs. So, if you don't have lightning bugs, that might be why. Yeah, the other thing, I'll just try to make sure, I really, I'm the one in my neighborhood, I'm out taking the leaves out of the street, even in the fall, before the weeper comes and gets them. I'm getting my neighbors bags of leaves, because I put a good layer of leaves on top of all my beds. I have patches in back, that it just builds up that soil so good. If you continually do that year after year, and that's the natural way of, between that and I don't have any problems with the soil. Let's see. And the other thing, I always would try to keep my yard all nice and tidy and cleaned up, and it's not that way anymore, because I've also learned that your stems of a lot of your plants, when you snap them off in the fall, they're hollow. Well, those stems are actually a home for a lot of the bees in the winter time, and actually up until almost like May, that's their home. And so try to, as much as you can, to have the next year's flowers to grow up around those existing dead plants from the previous year. That'll really help out. Leave, if you can, like in a back area, a little pile of branches, a dead log, if you're tempted, you want to clean it up. That dead log is providing such a ecosystem of all different kinds of, the birds will peck at that. So I might not win, yard of the year with the city, but I'm hoping that my plants, my critters that call my place home will call, they'll call my place the plant of the year, yard of the year. I do have, and I'll leave them up here. There's some books, Douglas Talamay, he's really like the main source driving a lot of this new approach to conservation that starts right in your yard. It doesn't have to be, it just, if each person took this seriously. And then a friend of mine loaned me these couple books, Raising Butterflies in the Garden here, that's very good. It tells the different host plants that the butterflies to encourage the butterflies. And same thing here. Here's Wildflowers and Grasses of Kansas. It's a field guide. So I'll leave those up here. Is there any questions?
You don't happen to have any pictures, Dan?
Do I have any pictures?
Yeah.
On my phone, I do. Yeah. Well, on my site, the Kansas Pollinator Friendly, you go and.
And that's a Facebook. group.
That's on Facebook,
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Great. Well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Any other questions for Kurt? Okay, rolling right along. Leah Danner-Garcia is next. She's from the Wichita area. Fidelity Bank built a brand new parking garage. And she's got a garden on that roof. Leah?
Thank you. Norm, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate tonight. And I've already gotten so much out of listening to the other presenters. I really connected with what Marcy said about sharing information. I'm finding other farmers and gardeners, my favorite people to talk to. And we try to visit as many farms as we can in season so that we can learn from our colleagues. And we also try to educate as well. And I loved hearing about the pollinator progression in your own farm. I identified with so much of what you said. We put bluebird boxes up about 4 years ago because of course they're insect eaters, and we had a pretty healthy barn swallow population, and we even get quail that come in and eat cucumber beetles. So I really identified with so much of your speech, and the more that we work with nature instead of against it, we find it very valuable at our farm. We are not organic certified, but we try to use organic principles in everything we do and not put any man-made chemicals of any kind on our farm. So I am owner operator of Firefly Farm, which is in its 9th year this year. Rise Farms, which, believe it or not, we're going into our 4th year of work there. It's only our 2nd year of growing, full year of growing, but all together with the research years and the planning and the working with the architects and the engineers, I've been involved in that program for 4 years. And then Firefly Food Hub was launched 2 years ago. This will be our 3rd year this year. So a glutton for punishment, I guess. I did ask Norm and understand that the people in the room and the people on the web, some of you are home gardeners, I understand, and some might be specialty crop farmers, which is what I'm technically considered as a specialty crop farm, because I raise food, and I find that such an oxymoron that food is a specialty crop. But that's how they distinguish us at the federal and state level, as opposed to row cropping and commodity crops. So I always get a giggle out of that. Thanks for helping me tonight. Sam's gonna be my button pusher. This is Firefly Farm 2 years ago. We had 3 caterpillar tunnels at that time. And then we had, they're 100 feet long. So I designed the beds in 50-foot increments so that I could standardize my row lengths, because the first few years I farmed, I just found little plots around our farm and they all had different lengths and it was terrible. I couldn't keep track of, so very quickly I learned to standardize my plots. This is now made up of 4 50 by 50 units. And they are, we still only have 3 caterpillar tunnels, but we have another 2 50 by 50 on the north end, and then 2 50 by 50 plots on the south end. And then in the middle, we have 4 50 by 50 plots that encompass the hoop houses and the rows between it. You can go ahead and go on. This is a look at our farm. And so originally I grew in these beds that had all these different lengths and it just became very unwieldy. I was constantly doing math, and glad I took all my math classes in high school. But that's a map of our farm. Okay, Sam. And my specialty is tomatoes. So I like to say that when you go to the grocery store to buy a tomato, you aren't buying a tomato, you're buying the idea of a tomato, because commercial tomato growers don't grow for flavor. They grow for size and color and shape, and not for flavor. In fact, I read a report several years ago now that they were doing some look at genetics on the tomatoes, and they found that those commercial breeders had bred the flavor genes right out of those commodity crop tomatoes. So I'm growing almost all heirloom varieties. Last year I had 960 tomato plants. And this year we're cutting back and doing some different things. So we're going back down to 450 this year. So a little bit different. Yeah, so that's all I'll say about that. This is an older plan of my farm with my greenhouses and the 250-foot plots. And yeah, so just I'm finding that the more time, energy I put into designing my crop plans, the better the more time I put in planning, the better my overall performance of my farm. Okay, Sam. Most specialty crop farmers are starting to figure out that it's really hard to make money on fruit sales alone. So we have joined the Kansas agritourism branch of the Wildlife and Parks organization, and it gives us some liability coverage. So we hold tours at our farm. For several years, I ran farmers markets, and this is an example. We ran 2-hour farmers markets on Sundays and saw about 1,000 people come through. So they're very popular. Problem is, everybody liked them because they were on grass, but when it rained, we had to cancel, and we ended up having to cancel at least one every year. And then the next slide is our farm to table dinner series. I started out selling wholesale to local restaurants. I wasn't interested in farmers markets, and I really wanted to, made a lot of sense. Do I want to take 50 pounds of tomatoes in 2 drops, 50 pounds each, 100 pounds of tomatoes to 2 restaurants, or do I want to go to the farmer's market on Saturday and sit there for 5 hours and sell 50 batches of 2 pounds? And so I really like the structure of the wholesale and being able to sell in larger quantities. I ran farm to table dinners for about 3 years. I ran, the farmers markets for 3 or 4 years, the tours I'm still doing. We're moving into special events. So we have at this farm 3 special events a year. We do an an Earth Day plant sale every year on Earth Day. So we double our production of starter plants. We start all of our own plants in-house in a germination chamber and move over to a propagation tunnel. And so that's getting to be a pretty big deal for us. In the summer, we've been holding a farmers market for the last several years and in conjunction with an open house so people can come see. And I think this year we're gonna start turning that into a tomato festival and selling tomato-centric foods and bring in our restaurant friends and other makers to participate. I feel that's really community centered, and I really want to help my colleagues out, and that's one way we do it. And then in the fall, in November, we do a Thanksgiving sweet potatoes sale. Sweet potatoes are a really big thing. For me, I grow one of my 50 by 50 plots is nothing but sweet potatoes. So that's a bird's eye view of Firefly Farm. I was asked to talk about what went well last year and what didn't. So I want to tell you that in my opinion, farmers are citizen scientists. So we do something, we observe the reaction of that thing. I make notes on those things. So I record my data, I analyze my data, and then next year I tweak. So I really like this concept of citizen scientists, and it's done me well to look at that and improve yearly, because if it takes a year to go through your process once, we all have a limited number of years, maybe 20, 30, if we're lucky and get into farming early enough, maybe 40 years. So you have to learn pretty quickly is what I found out. So the problems with last year, the heat really got my tomatoes. So when the heat is over 80 degrees at night, your tomatoes might still flower, but they won't set. So we got a very strong flush initially, and then the bottom dropped out. And then as the cooler weather came on, it actually started in August this year, the cooler weather, then my tomatoes came back and I was able to have some sales. But it's the first time in 20 years of growing tomatoes that that's happened to me. So I do see changes due to, I perceive it to be global warming. I've noticed changes over the last several years in our patterns. I know that's a very controversial concept, but I'm certainly seeing some changes in the last 8 years that I did not see in the previous 12, I'll say. So that's a bird's eye view of Firefly. What's my takeaway from that heat? My takeaway is, do I want to put in greenhouses with coolers as I move forward? I don't know. Do I want to move away from tomatoes and focus on other crops? I don't know. Those are decisions. I'm not going to do it this year. But I did hear someone say last year, a climate scientist say that 2022 is supposed to be the coolest season on record for the foreseeable future. So if that bears out, that's going to give tomato farmers a reason to pause. All right, so moving on to Rise Farms. Rise Farms is built on the 5th floor of a parking garage, and I did learn through my design and planning of this farm that cubic foot by cubic foot soil is heavier than a car. And so we could not put real soil on top of this farm. So in other words, dirt. dirt soil, I guess. I look at those things as being different, but we have a soilless growing medium, which is really interesting to me because I'm very interested in soil biology. And I'm taking a couple of classes this year to learn more about soil biology. And all the way at one end of the spectrum, we have mycorrhiza products and composting and all of the natural stuff. And then this farm is completely artifice. So I find that really intriguing that a soil girl is working with soilless growing medium, but that's the case. So it is 80% of a product. What we grow in is 80% a product called roof light, which is an aggregate rock that is heated to 200 degrees and blown full of air. So it's very porous and very lightweight, and it's 70% of that. It's 10% compost and 20% sand. So really, if you want to stop and think of it this way, it is a form of an aquaponic program. So we water in, as a soil person, I know that the mycorrhiza in the soil is really important to being pollinated around the root balls of the plants so that there's a healthy environment there around the plant, and it helps the plant uptake all the minerals and other products it needs to be healthy and produce nutrient-dense fruits and vegetables. So here we water in a mycorrhiza once a week, as well as our nutrients. So we have an intensive program that I'm really looking forward to improving on. I had no idea, and I had someone tell me about 6 months before our growing season started last year, and they said, well, you don't even know if you can grow there. And I was mortified to think about it, but we did find out we could grow there, and quite honestly, this farm exceeded my every expectation. Did we learn stuff? We learned a lot of stuff. We only had a couple of significant fails. Green beans, we grew to, in these first years, again, going back to this concept of citizen scientists, we grew a climbing bean and a bush bean. At Andover, my other farm, I've only grown bush beans, but we're growing several varieties of each crop to see what performs well, and all the beans failed for me. So I don't know what that means. I've talked to some other farmers, but I'm not growing them again, right? Because they don't grow. Learn your lesson and move on.
Mm-hmm.
So we break this farm down into 5 areas. We are available for tours, and I don't want to get too bogged down, so I'm going to keep moving. Thank you, Sam. This area had our herbs, and we have a small perennial area. We were growing sunchokes and asparagus, which love this environment. Go ahead. Go ahead. Our second area is a floral program. So I really like this concept of grown, not flown, when it comes to flowers, because most of our commercial flowers come from Mexico and Central America. They're heavily sprayed with all kinds of chemicals. And so we started a program. We cut them. I collected tin cans from the Fidelity employees, and we make $5 flower cans each week that they can buy. And, I like the concept that they can get into it without spending a lot of money and have a connection to their farm. So the next area, there's some of the flowers. Go ahead. And the next area was our greens area, with the exception of one cascading type cucumber that had to be put outside. So But mostly we're growing both loose leaf, so arugula spinach and loose leaf mixes. And then both, and also heads. So we grew a lot of butter lettuce this year, and we're moving into romaines, which look very different. Any romaine you grow is going to look very, very different from those real tight, dense heads you buy at the store. I couldn't even find seed like that. So I'm very curious to see what our romaine program looks like. You can go on. Fourth area are these big plots. This is probably most of all what a normal farm would be. And there are 5 of these big plot beds. The other thing that we found on the fruiting vegetables, so things like tomatoes and bell peppers and things like that, is that only the miniatures did well. The big tomatoes, so we're growing our cherry tomato mix, which is a combination of 5 varieties. We're growing that up here this year, but all the beefsteaks are going to be grown out of Firefly. We also grow what we call a saladette tomato, which is a 8 to 10 ounce tomato. It's the type that you can cut in quarters and drop on a salad. And we are going to grow those. I think those are small enough. In the peppers, we're going to do the little miniature snacking bell peppers, sweet bells, but the large Italian roasters, the large bell peppers, we're going to grow those in the soil at the other farm. I'm just finding better results. And you can keep going. So a couple of trellises we put in place. Yeah, keep going.
That's not beans.
Might be. Yeah, that might. Yeah, there's the cucumbers and these might be the beans. I'd have to look more carefully to tell you for sure. We do have a hoop house, and the only thing we have growing this winter is in the hoop house because the low temps in December took out our winter crops this year for the most part. Go ahead, Sam. So our greenhouse it's a glorified hoop house, but this end is our propagation tunnel, and that end is our indoor growing bed. And you can keep going. And we vertically trellis cucumbers inside and tomatoes inside, and really had bad luck with pollinators accessing the hoop house. We have drop down curtains, but it had very low pollination. And for liability issues, we're not allowed to bring bees in. So we're going with cucumber varietals that are self-pollinating next year. So that should do away with that issue. Go ahead. So this is these are some of our baby plants just germinated in windstrip trays coming out of our germination chamber. So because we are a micro farm at 15,000 square feet, we have to turn the crops over as much as possible in order to try and make a buck. So we start almost all of our seeds, if it's not direct seeded, they're started in germination chambers. So why is that important? A tomato takes 12 to 14 days, and in a germ chamber, I can get it down to 2 days. So I can speed my whole cycle up. And then we go on the next slide to lights, and we let them stay there after they germinate and come out of the germination chamber. They go under lights, and we leave them there until they get their first or second round of true leaves, and then they go ahead, over to the tables, and then we up pot them depending upon what it is. Some things go directly to transplant, and some get up potted at this stage before they get transplanted. Go ahead. Here are some of the vegetables we grew last year. Red meat radish. There's also a black Japanese radish, and they're both pithy and woody in my opinion. I have never been able to grow them very well, and these were very woody. will not grow them again, but they're awfully beautiful. Go ahead. Beets, red beets. Go ahead. Baby bok choy. We started growing a short bok choy, and we ran weekly. We planted them weekly and ran them through for a specific restaurant. And it was a very successful program. Going to be doing a lot more of our crops on a custom growing kind of system as we move forward. Garlic scapes. Ori's does a wonderful job with their garlic. I'll never be a big garlic grower, but we did have a few, and we cut the scapes and sold those before we harvested the bulbs. Tomatoes, of course. This is Sunrise Bumblebee, which we did vertically trellis in our greenhouse. These are my farm manager, Carrie, and her second, Trish, and these ladies. It has been a real honor. I think that's Kate or Lexi in the background. These ladies all stayed with me another year. It's a real honor to work with them. They're very hardworking and very dedicated, and just genuinely good people to be around. I consider myself extremely lucky. Here's our crew again. All these people are still with me this year, and I couldn't be more honored. Learnings and changes. So what I've discovered is that fruits and vegetables have 3 basic root depths, 6, I think it's 6, 12, and 18. And so those individual, that area 3, that was the individual long beds that I was growing the greens in, they don't need that depth. So they're going to go back out to a big plot, and then my tomatoes and peppers are going to go in those deep 24-inch beds, and much else too. So, oh, my social media dropped off.
Oh, there it is.
So right now, all 3 of my businesses, if you Google, if you search for this name, they'll all come up. We've just broken them into individual websites, and we're hoping by Friday to launch at least one of these, if not all 3 by Friday. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. If you're interested in ordering food from us, the hub is where you would order. And the only pickup we have right now is out of Firefly Farm. So right now we're carrying Firefly Farm products in our hub, rice farms in our hub, quail eggs from Level Meadow Farm is in our hub, and we're growing Hippie's Heart, or we're selling Hippie's Heart, which is hemp seed oil for cooking, and hemp seed seeds. It's very, very high in protein. There's some real benefits to cooking and consuming hemp products. And so those 4 products are in our hub this year. We hope to build out our food hub. The first year we had 10 local farmers, ranchers, and food makers. So we wanted to pull back this year since it was our first year at the rooftop farm. And so we pulled back and just really focused on the farm, but now we're getting ready to reopen or really push on the food hub this year. So the only pickup house, it's contactless pickups on Tuesday and Friday. You can order any day, but the next day, whether it's a Tuesday or Friday, is your pickup day closest to when you order. And we're hoping by spring to have a downtown pickup location. So our farm is located out by Andover, Kansas. So that's where our pickup house is at the current time. And then we'll move in. So I didn't wear my watch. What a mistake when you're presenting. I probably used too much of your time. Are there any questions?
Being up on the roof, do you run into heat issues? It seems like it'd be really hot up there.
Well, yes, so what we've noticed is if it's hot on the ground, it's gonna be hotter on the roof. If it's cold on the ground, it's gonna be colder on the roof. And if it's windy on the ground, it's gonna be really windy on the roof.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had some tomatoes just roasting the vine, and that was ground level last year.
excuse me.
Got some curly
I think this will do it. Sorry, I've been sick. Yeah, so actually, and because of this kind of hydroponic system in our irrigation program, we didn't burn up there, we burned up out at the other farm, believe it or not, 960 plants.
Love that heat. How about how?
We have a pretty extensive pepper program. And jalapenos are part of that. We probably have maybe 10 varietals of peppers.
There is a question from Zoom. Jessica asks, can you explain the structure that supports your rows of tomatoes? I'm looking for ideas other than traditional tomato cages and noticed some kind of rope in the photo you shared.
Yeah, so up at Rise, out at Firefly, I grow all indeterminate tomatoes, which are tomatoes that vine and they grow all year. Up at Rise, I grew determinate tomatoes that they grow to 4 or 5 feet tall. They're often referred to as bush tomatoes. They put in all their flowers at the same time. They put on all the fruit and they're done. And specifically because I have some issues with trellising up because we aren't in soil, so I have some issues there. So at Firefly, we vertically trellis in the hoop house. We vertically trellis because we have the structure to hang strings from. About half of our tomato crop in past years has been inside and half outside. And we use a program called Florida Weave outside. So you weave, you have to put in T-stakes and then you weave. I put them in every 5 plants. I put them in and my plants are on 15-inch centers. And then you weave down one side and then you weave back the other side. And what it makes is a pocket for your tomatoes. And I don't know how to describe it, but the pressure of the rope weave keeps the plants upright. Problem with that is that they do not get good air movement. So anybody who's tried to grow a lot of tomatoes in Kansas knows that funguses are a major issue with tomato growth. And I think the Florida weave method lends to fungus. You have to be very careful with them. And I am probably moving towards growing my tomato plants all under hoop house in the future. Anybody else?
I have a question. Moved here this past year from Minnesota, and so obviously being in a totally different zone, just being a home gardener, what do you recommend starting with in the specialty vegetable crops? You know, we don't have raised bed gardens, but we did inherit a nice big plot.
Yeah.
from the previous owners.
So I think you should jump right into tomatoes.
Okay,
Don't be afraid of those.
more of the smaller ones or?
Yeah, so you might want to, I don't know, this year for our Earth Day plant sale,
Yeah.
we're gonna sell some of our indeterminates like we grow. And then more and more people are asking for things that are container gardening. And the bush varieties, the determinants work very well for that. And then I have found some dwarf varieties. I planted a couple of dwarf varieties up at Rise last year that I was amazed at how much they put on, how sweet they were. I was very impressed. So you're welcome. If you don't want to come to my plant sale, that's okay. Reach out and I'll tell you. I would tell you to look at peppers. I don't know what you like in the way of peppers, but bell peppers, jalapeno peppers, Italian roasting peppers are all pretty easy. So I started with summer crops and grew summer crops for many, many years. I didn't grow spring and fall. Now I'm growing around the clock. The other basic summer ones are cucumbers and summer squash. So you have lots of choices there. You have yellow crooknecks, you have zucchini, you have patty pans. I grew an 8-ball little round squash that people really liked for a couple of years. Their enthusiasm is beginning to wane, but they would cut them and stuff them.
Oh.
And so the first couple of years I grew them, they were such an oddity. They're called 8-ball. Johnny's is who I buy almost all my seeds from, or Baker Creek. Baker Creek is all heirloom varietals. Johnny's is what most of the specialty crop growers buy there. It's for truck farmers or people like
Do you
me.
sell different varieties of lettuce at your Earth Day sale?
So we are not. We are growing lettuce up at Rise, and we're, but I probably will not sell starts for lettuce. Lettuce is easy breezy, but you may have to use insect netting. One of the things I really loved about growing on the roof last year is that those delicate spring and fall crops, if I grew them out at Firefly, I would have to have full insect netting. And we had some insect netting up last year. The insects definitely find us on the 5th floor. It's not too high. But the greens we're growing up there are much easier than me growing in my ground out east. So big fruiting things are easy peasy, in my opinion, summer crops, and they produce for long periods of time. So yeah, reach out to me if you want more.
Was that bok choy, was that inside the hoop house or was that out in the?
That was inside. So, you know, that baby bok choy, we grew it last spring, but what happened is because we have this soilless growing medium, it's very coarse and the pebbles got down inside the leaf progression. Now, we've not had that problem with the greens, but we actually grew those in grow boxes in our hoop house. And rotated. I think we planted something like 3 a week, 3 boxes, and we had 10 per box or something. So yeah.
Are you able to share? You said you were growing that custom. Was it for another restaurant or something?
Yeah, it was for the Belmont.
Oh, okay.
It bought it for months from us, and it was a standard side on their dishes. So I'm happy to call out the restaurants that buy from us. I like to say that when if you want to buy directly from me and cook your own, that's great. But if you buy from a restaurant that buys from us, you're supporting local 2 layers deep. And so I really appreciate those chefs buying from me, and I try to call them out. There are many. In fact, when you get on my website, you'll be able to see the logos of all the restaurants I sell to on a regular basis.
Nancy online asked, what were the dwarf variety names?
Oh, I don't know. I will have to check and I'll post them after. Yeah.
Okay.
I think they were both from Baker's Creek, but I don't remember the varieties. If you get onto Baker's Creek and you search dwarf tomatoes, one is called Tidy Treats and the other is called, I don't know. I'll have to look, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you all. It was really a pleasure to share with you.
Thank you, Leah. Katie, are you ready? You're on. Our next speaker is Katie Schmidt. She's a local girl. Graduated from Newton High and also Bevel College. She presently is the head groundskeeper and horticulturalist at Dyck Arboretum in Hefton, Kansas.
I sent a PowerPoint your way, but I also have it on I sent an email.
Okay,
earlier
if you have it
today.
on the thumb drive,
I
I'll
have
just
it on
grab
the
it.
thumb drive
Great,
too,
let's get that going.
Thanks for coming in.
you know. Hi, everyone. Like you said, my name is Katie. I'm the horticulturist at Dyck Arboretum. I've been there about 6 years. My degree at Bethel College was in biology, plant sciences, natural science, and my focus was on prairie ecosystems. So today I'm talking about host plants, native host plants. There it is. We'll hope it comes up. And it's a pretty short little presentation, just really focused in on what a host plant is, what it does, and what some of my favorites are. You kind of touched on host plants a little bit. But this is kind of an in-depth look. I do have to tag onto all this vegetable talk. I'm getting super excited. I didn't do a vegetable garden last year because unfortunately my house caught on fire last February.
Oh, no.
Let me tell you, that kind of takes out your summer plans.
Yeah.
But this year I'm gonna get back into it. And my parents and my family, we actually operate Hidden Stems Greenhouse in North Newton. We bought it a couple years ago. It used to be Benton's Greenhouse. And so I'm really looking forward to spring is now a time where mom and dad and my siblings, we all transplant and gets very exciting. So yes, we have lots of specialty vegetables there too, if you're interested, but native host plants. So, I'll have you click. So we've talked a little bit about this. We touched on it. The insect populations are not doing so well. So here's a little bit of an academic look at that. This is a graph from Yale 360. This is from several years ago. So this information is not even as grim as it could be. So there's lots of reasons why this is happening. It's chemical use. It's, monoculture crops. It's urbanization. It's kind of all those things together that are leading to these huge declines. So one figure from this study showed that we've lost 40% of the expected biomass of insects. So they did this for 10 years. They were catching insects in these nets and just really weighing them, and then kind of projecting that out. And 40%. That's a lot of missing insects. Next slide for me. And that's a really big problem when you think about 60% of birds rely on insects for food. And it is more than that for birds who are reproducing. So, even a bird who might come to your feeder and enjoy sunflower seeds, when they're trying to feed their young, they must have insects, Human babies need breast milk. They can't eat Cheerios right out of the womb. Same thing with baby birds. They can't eat seeds right out of the egg. They must have protein of some kind from insects. So it's super important. And we don't think about this much, but 80% of our wild plants depend on insects for pollination. So we will and have started to see a decline in the formation of seeds. If the bee doesn't visit that wild salvia, that salvia can't make a seed, and then we don't have salvia again. So we are starting to see that happen. That's a real concern. So we talk a lot at the Arboretum. A lot of what we do is working with residential, either farm landowners or residential folks to think about how they're stewarding their land. What are you doing with it? Do you have a small city lot that you want to make sure it's pollinator friendly, or do you have hundreds of acres that you'd like to farm more friendly? We do both of those things. And so I always like to point out that each little bit of land matters. And these are the three figures I use. One is that about 43% of the lands in the US are farmed. That's a big difference of if you're thinking about you're a monarch butterfly flying over the United States. The land that you evolved to navigate looks very different now. You used to fly over the Great Plains where there were millions of miles of, millions of acres of uninterrupted prairies. And now you find corn and wheat, which are delicious and they make for a very stable civilization, but they're not great for wildlife, right? If you're a bird trying to find nesting habitat and you're flying over South Dakota, you used to have a lot of lovely treed areas and prairies, and you don't find that anymore. You find corn. So things have changed significantly. So each little bit of yard now matters a lot. In Kansas alone, we have about 500,000 acres of grass lawns. And actually nationwide, grass lawns are one of the most irrigated non-food crops. They consider it a crop. That's how much we irrigate it. Really kind of pointless, right?
Yeah.
And we touched on this a little bit, but I love yard. I have a dog. I love a nice yard to throw a frisbee in, but really I don't need much more than that, right? Because it doesn't serve any purpose. The root zone of most non-native turf grass is only about 6 inches. Versus a native grass like the buffalo grass or a little blue stem can be anywhere from 5 to 13 feet. So a huge difference in the amount of soil holding, the aeration of the soil, the mycorrhizal activity, it's just off the charts for our native grasses, not so much for those turf grass lawns, non-native turf lawns. And then lastly, 80% of us live in cities. It used to be that most people lived in the country and a small bit of us lived in the city. That has flip-flopped. And so now the control of the land and the stewardship of the land has changed. You have fewer people who have many thousands of acres. And then you have a lot of little city people like me who just have my little plot. So it's important to think about who is controlling the land and where can we make a difference, right? And I can make a difference in my yard and also by buying from farmers who care about these things, you know, to think about who is controlling the land that you are stewarding. Next step. So host plants, what we're here to talk about is if you're concerned about insects, one of the many ways you can help is by planting host plants. So a host plant is a plant on which a certain organism must live. So not just a plant that they like, right? Aphids like lots of plants, right? They don't really have a one host, they have a many hosts, right? But when I'm talking about host plants, specifically caterpillar host plants, that means that caterpillar cannot eat something else. Just, it's not that it has a favorite, it only has one option, right? So we're going to see a lot of different caterpillars and their favorite plants or plant families. But something that I always hear people talk about in pollinator gardens is the flower. We're very focused on the flower. What flowers do you have? Flowers at the right time of the year. Flowers. But if you don't have host plants, it's like an adults only bar, right? They're coming, they're drinking, they're flying away. They might even be mating and flying away. But there's no nursery for the young. So I always think it's important to include host plants in your pollinator gardens. Lenora Larson of Kansas City has, I think she has a blog, a website, but she also contributes to the Kansas City newspapers. She's a wonderful host plant guru. I think all of my host plant knowledge probably started with Lenora Larson. So look her up. She has great information and great guides for native host plants. But yeah, so adult pollinators can go around and feed on lots of different things, but their babies often can only eat one kind of thing. So we can plant these things for functionality, not just for looks. We want to make sure that they're feeding something. So the first one is really well known, milkweed. We hear a lot about milkweed. It is kind of the poster child. It's the gateway plant we talk to people about, right? If you want to start with native plants, people often hear about milkweed, which is unfortunate because it's actually not that easy to grow. Very finicky, grows in the ditch fine, but if you try to grow it in your garden, just forget it. But so it's kind of a terrible first plant to start with, but it is useful to all of these things, not only monarch butterflies, their caterpillars must feed on milkweed. Now there are several species, anything with that Asclepius, that genus and species name, anything with that Asclepius will work. So you can have common milkweed, you can have Sullivan's milkweed, some are tall, butterfly milkweed tends to be the prettiest one, people like the best. But any of those will work. So it's not just one type, but also queen butterflies in the top corner here, they also rely on milkweed. Cycnia moths, which moths don't get a lot of, you know, people aren't in the media worried about moths, but we should be. Moths are also suffering. And cycnia moths, this was taken at the Dyck Arboretum nursery. They also need milkweed. And I think the next one is also about milkweed. Yeah, tussock moths. Oh, have you ever seen one of these guys? They look like grandma's shag carpet. Don't they look like calico carpet from like 1962?
Yeah.
I love them. They're so great. And they are gregarious feeders, which means there's not just one, right? Like you talked about, you come out and your plant was fine yesterday, and then today it has been eaten to skeleton. That's what they do. But the milkweed is fine. It recovers. It was made to be eaten. Your plants, they were made to be eaten. That's their function. Plants are the very bottom of the pyramid. If they're not being eaten, the rest of the pyramid is not being built. So you want them to be eaten, but these little guys are super. I've seen a lot of people kill these. They say, well, there's not gonna be anything left for the monarchs. And I say, oh, you're missing it. You're missing the point. You're not just saving it for the pretty butterfly. These are great food for birds. I have seen a robin come down and pick 2 or 3 up at a time, right? It's like a feast. Now, I can't imagine eating that with all that hair. So this is a lot of different types of milkweed. Like I said, it's not just one. And the orange one tends to be everybody's favorite. I think it's the hardest to grow. So if you're starting with native plants, don't start with butterfly milkweed. Very difficult. But like horsetail milkweed in the top corner there, the white one, that one is pretty user-friendly, doesn't spread aggressively, pretty short. So there are lots of different kinds. I encourage you to find the one that actually is going to work in your garden. They can be very long-lived once they're in a happy place. Okay, houseplants for sulfurs. I bet you guys have seen these sulfur butterflies on a white gravel road, like dirt roads. They love to do that thing called puddling or mineraling, where they find a wet spot on a road and they drink the minerals. So they love to be on those rocky surfaces, but they're also in the country because they like alfalfa. They need pea plants. So if you want a native plant in your garden that will attract these, senna. Wild senna, that Senna marylandica, or actually Senna hebecarpa is also, that's the one that we sell at the Arboretum. A little bit easier. They love it, and we get them every year. Tons of these little beautiful green caterpillars. Beautiful, very bright and vibrant. Partridge pea is another one. That's actually a native annual. And that one will come up. It loves a disturbed area. So if you have a ditch at your place or something, you just want to cover the ground, partridge pea will do it. And it's beautiful. Long bloom season, only about 2 feet tall. Oh, so this in the far, what is that? You're right, left. That's partridge pea over there. And then this is senna, has a really pretty tall plant, about 4 feet, likes the shade, partial shade. And it has a bloom that's almost a foot tall. Looks tropical, but it's not. It's a Kansas woodland plant. Really nice. The other plant, caterpillar that people are pretty familiar with is swallowtails. If you have ever planted dill or parsley, you see swallowtails, or you should. They're pretty common around. They're those caterpillars that if you harass them a little bit, their horns will come out. It's very fun for kids, not fun for the caterpillar. And they have dimorphism, so a little bit of a difference between the male and female butterflies. So yes, you can plant dill, parsley, fennel, anything in that carrot family. If you're looking for a native, Golden Alexander is one of the best natives, I think, for attracting it because it's the best behaved. Like, Queen Anne's lace, not so well behaved. They love it, right? Poison hemlock, they love it. I don't really want it in my yard. But this is Golden Alexander. That's great in your yard. It's a lovely garden plant, landscaping plant, only about 2 feet tall. And I've seen it growing in the full sun in the prairie, and then also in the shade in the hedgerow. I've seen it kind of dry, wet, very adaptable, really nice plant. We have it in the nursery at the Arboretum, and I rarely sell it because it gets eaten about 2 weeks before our sale. So it's just sticks. And I try to tell people, no, it's a good thing. Buy these sticks. It means it's been eaten. So this is spotted Daytana. This is one of my favorite caterpillars. And I see it every fall at the Arboretum. As you imagine, most of my day at the Arboretum in the summer is just taking pictures of caterpillars. You can see. I take a lot of pictures of caterpillars. I'm very good at finding caterpillar poop. If you ever want to talk to me about how to spot caterpillars, I can tell you by looking at the frass, right? I follow the frass to find caterpillars. And these guys have an excellent frass trail. They are usually in the hundreds. And so if they're feeding on your bushes, I see the poo all over the sidewalk. Excellent. Caterpillar poop is also one of the best things for a plant. It's really interesting. But Daytana, anyways, they look like a piece of rolled up bark when they're a moth. I bet you've seen them 100 times, but never really seen them. Fascinating little moth. But they are called Daytana perspicua, or kind of conspicuous, because they arch their back. If you poke them, they like really stand up for themselves. Also very fun for kids.
They're perspicacious.
Yeah, perspicacious. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are really, really interesting little caterpillars, and I think on the next page, I have their host plant. So their host plant is anything in the roost family. That was like sumac, smooth sumac, tall sumac. Rus aromatica, I think, is the best one for a home gardener. It's not going to form like a crazy large thicket like some of this smooth sumac. Some of that can be way out of control. This does not sucker, tends to stay in its own little bush. Take some trimming. If you have just a straight Rus aromatica, you'll have to trim it if you want to keep it in shape, but it doesn't spread everywhere. Bright yellow blooms in spring. Bees love this. It's like one of the first things to bloom. And I see a lot of early like sweat bees, little bees that have just come out of the ground. They are really drawn to Rus. Green through the summer almost takes no water. I never water these things. They just survive. Beautiful red foliage in fall, and it produces a berry. It's like an all-star plant for me. It's good in every season and doesn't need my care. Rus aromatica. I think fragrant sumac, if you're looking to buy it, fragrant sumac.
Is the berry poisonous at all?
I've never eaten one.
Neighborhood kids and all that?
That's a good question. Most of the berries on native plants are poisonous in some capacity. If you would eat a lot of them, right? I don't know that one would. I know that like smooth sumac, like tall, like when you see the tall prairie sumac, those sumac berries are edible. You make lemonade out of them. But if you're allergic to cashews, mangoes like me, not edible. Same plant family. Kind of depends on who you are. Try one, see, call me back. Not sponsored by Dyck Arboretum.
You'll have your answer that way too.
Just keep tabs on it, folks. Yeah, I don't know. I would not recommend eating them, but I do know that there are other members of the Rus family that aren't poisonous, so. But the berries are also very, very small, very small. Zebra swallowtails. This is a fascinating caterpillar. It disguises itself as bird dung. Why would a bird want to eat you when you look like that? Looks like you've already been eaten. So really interesting. I would say look out. If you think there's bird poo on your plant leaves, look again. Often it's one of these guys or a viceroy caterpillar. Viceroys are the ones that look like monarchs but aren't. They also disguise themselves as bird poop, and they even kind of curl up. They really commit. Great actors. And then giant swallowtails, they're very, very chunky caterpillars. They look like the caterpillar that Simba eats in The Lion King. That's what I tell kids. That big juicy one, right? That's a giant swallowtail caterpillar. But these guys need a plant in the citrus family. Around here, that's pretty hard to find, except for hop tree. Tilia trifoliata, wonderful little tree that's native to like eastern Kansas and the Ozarks. It does have blooms that smell like citrus, like very, very jasmine-y, orangey, but it's native to Kansas. Takes a little bit of extra water, worth it, I think. And I think the next slide is pawpaws. Zebra swallowtails need pawpaws. So that's the pawpaw fruit right there. Have you ever had a pawpaw?
No, and I want to grow.
Come to the Arboretum in September. These fall off the trees. Lovely plant. But I love it because this is a pawpaw tree. Nice shape, not a big tree. Honestly, it's a good yard tree. It's only in Kansas going to get about 25 feet tall, 25 to 30 feet, not huge. And the spread, it kind of has a natural pyramidal shape, not a lot of trimming. My main beef is that it does spread by suckers if it's really happy. So either let it or mow around it. But the fruit is really good. It tastes like custard. You don't eat too many. Just gonna let you decide. No, you know what that means. Don't eat too many at once. And that's hop tree. Very interesting. It looks like it shouldn't be native, but it's a great native tree. And both of these, what's nice about a host plant tree is it has a lot of foliage. So you won't just get one or two caterpillars. Often, if you become kind of a resting stop, you will get lots of caterpillars because you have lots of foliage. Next. Now, regal fritillary. This is actually probably very common all around you. Fritillaries, they like violets. Well, not that they don't just like them, they need them, right? Violets are their host plants, but a lot of people are getting rid of violets, trying to get rid of them because they're aggressive, not you. You're letting them grow. Yeah, they can be absolutely bullyish in the garden, but there's a place for them. I think they're great ground cover too. If you're trying, especially like people always say, what do I plant in the shade under trees? Violets. Violets don't care where they are. They'll grow anywhere. And they're great where you can't grow grass. I have taken a lot of violets out of one of my front beds because they will outcompete some other things. But there are some violets that don't. So if you're trying to grow them amongst friends and you want them to play nice, violet pedata is the best one. Doesn't really spread, stays very tidy if you're trying to put it in a formal garden. Common violet is the Violet Aurelia. That one's a little bit of a bully, but it's great in areas where you're converting your yard. Regal Fritillaria, I think, is actually starting to be endangered in the east. So like Illinois, Indiana, they're seeing very, very low numbers because a lot of violet habitat is gone. So grow violets. Next. Pipevine swallowtail, I think this is my last one. Pipevine, Aristolochia, makes a really cool flower. I probably don't have a picture of it. It's called Dutchman's pipe. And it is kind of a pitcher looking plant. It looks like it should be tropical. It's not. It's a native to the Ozarks in eastern Kansas. And as you can see, they usually hatch out in groups. So you have lots of these really eerie, creepy looking, wonderful caterpillars. And pipevine grows really fast. So, you know, that could be maybe one season. It can just absolutely go. So put up a trellis. I would put it in a pot because I don't want it to grow on my other stuff. But it's wonderful if you have like an arbor and you want seasonal foliage on an arbor, pipevine will go like that. You will not have to wait for greenery or on a pergola.
Yeah, I thought that was trumpet vine.
No, trumpet vine is Campsis radicans, and you can tell the difference because trumpet vine has a leaf with leaflets on each side. It's got that kind of arms. And the petioles on those leaves are also sometimes orange, and then they will have that bright orange trumpet. Trumpet vine is a problem. It's highly invasive. They're still selling it at Lowe's, and when I see it, I always tell somebody, and I'm like, stop selling this garbage plant. They don't care what I say. But if you see it, don't buy it. Don't buy trumpet vine. Yes, it feeds hummingbirds, but also our native plants feed hummingbirds, you know? Okay, next. Oh yeah, the red spotted purple. This is one of my favorite butterflies. Look at this little guy. Doesn't that look like bird do? Excellent little caterpillars, little cool chunky guys. But they love black cherry trees. And a black cherry is not like a fruiting cherry that's delicious for you. It makes a very tiny cherry. Birds love it. Over 30 species of birds feed on the black cherry tree. Wow. And honestly, it is native to the eastern third of Kansas. So it's not a hard tree to grow. It will want a little bit of extra water upon establishment. We're having these hot, dry summers. You're going to have to water it. So when I say like it's a native tree, it doesn't mean you can plant it, forget it. You can, but it will die. But if you, it's worth the work because they make these big pendulous white blooms. Beautiful blooming tree, and it's a full-size tree. It'll be 40 or 50 feet when it's happy. Lovely tree, and it's one of the few things that a red spotted purple will lay its eggs on. And you see up there in the top corner, tiny egg looks like a disco ball. So when you're looking for like butterfly eggs, sometimes they're like the size of a pinhead, really tiny, and they look like a disco ball. So I always try to.
So cool to actually see them lay an egg while you're sitting there.
Yes, they curve they like monarchs will come at our sale right before the sale is happening. And I put all my milkweed out on the table and the monarchs come and they are like curving their little butts around. Laying.
I have dill up on our front. I see the swallowtails just coming out.
It's fascinating.
Laying an egg right there.
Yeah, you see those eggs come out. It's so cool. Then I get really protective. I'm like, nobody can buy this one. You set it in the back. Okay, next. Okay, so a lot of people say, well, how do I know it's a good caterpillar, bad caterpillar? First of all, I would say most of them are good. Don't squish indiscriminately. Most of them are good. And you might not think they're good, but they're good for somebody, right? If it's an invasive species, okay, then we want to know, you know. But a lot of people think good.
Hornworm, can we squish?
Hornworm, well, it turns into a sphinx moth. So it just depends. It kind of depends on what, you know, if you're trying to make a living, well, maybe. But me, if a hornworm wants to eat my tomatoes, my neighbor has tomatoes, you know. Hornworm, those big ones, they turn into these beautiful hummingbird sphinx moths. And there are other things they can eat too, I will say. Sometimes I take him off my tomatoes and I go put him on a spurge, because they can eat spurge too. But if you're not sure, I seek. I use this app a lot. I'm getting pretty good at identifying things, but I still get stumped. And this is the best app that I have found where I can point my camera at anything, a beetle, a worm, a plant. And I appreciate this plant because it doesn't just make a random guess. I don't like that Plant Snap tries to give you these random guesses, and often they're not close. This will tell you, if it doesn't know, it'll tell you the plant family. Well, that gets you close and you can Google from there, you know, it gives you some clues to get you on the road. I love iSeek. It's the best app and it's free. So super handy, and you can connect it to iNaturalist, which is a citizen science project where you track what you see. So you take a picture and you say, I saw a brown squirrel on this date, you know, and it goes into their database and it helps researchers study where things are, what time of year they're active, where they're moving. So it's a great tool. We use it a lot, the Arboretum. That's my last slide. Oh, special considerations about host plants and insects. We talked a little bit about rocks and puddling. This is what that behavior is, where they're all drinking. They need minerals. So butterflies and moths need minerals. It's important to provide some wet places for that. I know that we like to cover every inch of our yard in mulch. So there's not very many wet, open, bare soil places, but either leave a muddy patch, because that's a great way to attract butterflies, is a patch of mud. Or you can take a dish, put a bunch of river rocks in it, and put water in the bottom. And they will land on the river rocks and stick their tongues between the rocks. That's a fun thing to do.
So how do you keep the mosquitoes out?
The mosquitoes wouldn't love like a thing that has a bunch of rocks. Like you don't just want like standing water. You don't want like a big surface. So if there's rocks and then water underneath the rocks, there's not going to be a lot of room for mosquitoes to like mature in there because they need room to move.
And I know there's certain, I'm sorry.
Yeah, certain times a year
There's
too.
certain things you can plant to attract dragonflies.
Yeah,
Dragonflies love mosquitoes.
yeah, dragonflies are mosquitoes like worst enemy, and bats too. Bats eat a ton of mosquitoes. So yeah, definitely. And then also just emptying it frequently, you know, spraying. What I do with mine, I have a bird bath, an old bird bath that I put river rocks in. And when I go fill the bird bath, I spray the old water out, put new water in every couple days. Overwintering logs, you talked about that. A pile of sticks is probably the best thing you can do for the environment right now. Go pile up some sticks in your yard. Birds love it. Insects need it. They need fallen wood, dead wood, logs. And a lot of our pollinators friends like fireflies, they need leaf litter. You talked about not seeing a lot more fireflies. Fireflies, they say, may be extinct in the next 50 years because there's no leaf litter. We mow everything, we mow the roadsides, and they need that first inch of litter, either grass thatch or leaf litter. So leaving your yard just a little bit wonky is a good thing. Or you have an area, the backyard, that has sticks and leaves and stuff. That's one of the best things you can do. And obviously, you know, don't spray things that are going to kill them.
So I have a question on that. So I live in North Newton too, and there's always the, hey, this is when we're picking up leaves, and maybe they do that in Newton too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's expected. I think there's this thing that people will hate us if we don't put them out there, and I'm always like, I know it's good to leave the leaves.
Yeah, leave the leaves. It's a dumb societal construct.
Yeah.
It's fake.
I hate driving through North Newton, seeing them by the curb.
Yeah.
So dumb. You know what I do? I take a truck and I go load up all their leaves and I take them in my garden.
Yeah.
Thanks.
There you go.
Mhm.
You silly people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
let people come and dump their. leaves.
Yeah,
That's why I said
absolutely.
We use them in the compost program.
Leaves are bad for your lawn. So like when we have leaves that are piled up in that one nice patch of grass that we have, I rake them out of there and into my garden. You know, I'm not saying don't move them. They will smother your lawn. And my job as horticulturalist at the Arboretum is to keep the lawns nice, right?
Yeah.
So things you could do to keep the lawns nice. I would like to move the leaves, not remove the leaves. Move them to places where they can be undisturbed all season. So I dump, like at the Arboretum, I often will go and collect leaves early in the season. Hopefully, I try to get them before a lot of the egg layings happen. And then I go dump them in the hedgerows, right? So if you want to, you know, let them be leaf litter, they're off the lawns, finding useful ways to use your leaves.
Does mowing over the leaves cause any damage to the?
Oh, I'm sure.
the living bugs and
I'm,
everything else.
as I'm mowing over and collecting leaves, I'm like, sorry.
I just figured because it looks
Yeah.
nicer on the lawn when it's cut up and
Oh, yeah.
over and then.
Yeah, if you
Good
mulch your
soil.
leaves, that's really good for the soil. It probably kills anything that already laid its eggs in there. But there would be
They just go all
opportunity,
die.
yeah, there would be opportunity for other insects who could to climb in, you know, so it's just about timing. So we mulch a lot of leaves, but I also, yeah, at home, I try to take bags, and when you see them bagged up, it's like, it gets really hot in that bag. It's like, I got you, buddy, and I go break them open and dump them on my garden. So, yeah, using leaves and what we think is waste is rarely actually waste. These guys really want it. So any questions about host plants or the arboretum or anything like that? If you're interested in native plants, that's kind of my thing. That's my expertise. We have a Flora, Kansas native plant sale that happens in April and September, and that's our fundraiser for keeping the arboretum happy and healthy. So you can find all information on that at dickarboretum.org. We have a blog that goes out once a week. That's kind of fun. Sometimes I write for that. Staff takes turns. And like I said, my parents own hidden stems, and so they're kind of more vegetables and greenhouse type annuals, that type of stuff. So native plants, trees, and shrubs, the arboretum. All the other stuff, hidden stems, and if you call either, you're gonna get me. So,
And so the Arboretum sale does have trees, native
Yes.
trees, pawpaws we can buy there?
yes, we
right?
will have pawpaws. So I'm the greenhouse manager for them, and I think I have a supplier in Missouri who grows pawpaws for me,
Okay,
and I have a few that I grew myself from seed.
It was during the garden tour last summer that I learned that pawpaw is a native plant. Because it's
Yeah.
mentioned in the Jungle Book, I thought.
That's so confusing. And I looked this up recently, and a pawpaw is actually another word for, oh, I'm gonna get this wrong. There is a tropical fruit that is sometimes called a pawpaw.
a durian,
It was like papaya, but it wasn't. It was a fruit that I wasn't familiar with. But
not a durian.
no, oh, maybe. I'm also not familiar with that.
They call it like a fermented cream cheese.
Oh,
Durian is all.
Yeah, it's supposed to have narcotic
I'm interested in this plant.
effect.
A cream cheese plant. No, but it is mentioned in the Jungle Book, very strange, but it is a native plant. It's really fascinating. One of the reasons that it's not commercially produced is that once you pick it, you have about 6 hours. I mean, it just does not store. It gets brown immediately. It's like cutting open a potato. The fuse is lit. And so there's no way to like grow it and ship it, really. They have done some more grafting pawpaws to make them, you know, better, bigger fruiting, but honestly, just the straight pawpaw that you find in the woods hiking in Arkansas is one of the best tasting fruits I've ever had. Tastes like a mango, had a baby with a pineapple. And, you know, maybe a 3-way with banana. It was just that fascinating fruit, really delicious, and it makes for an excellent like pudding pie.
And there's one in the Midtown Arboretum, so you can go and
There
steal the
is.
fruit. Or
There
not steal,
is.
right? Yeah,
It's fruit, it's
it's
free.
free fruit.
Falling from the sky. They
Yeah.
also,
Midtown.
yes,
Mhm.
and they also have one of the best looking yellowwood trees in the Arboretum. Us tree people, we scope out other people's trees.
Mhm.
They have a beautiful yellowwood specimen. So yeah, if you're ever interested in any of that stuff, you can contact me at Dyck Arboretum. And we do landscape consults, we do it all. So, great.
Great.
Any questions for Katie?
I turned it off, maybe I should.
I don't see any questions on the
They're all
online
asleep.
portion.
Did a great job.
Any questions for Katie?
Did a great job.
Any more
No, it's great.
online?
Nothing online at the moment. But I really enjoyed all this so much. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Oh, yeah, I see a question here.
Question.
Yeah.
New rules and so much of new lots will have, city property that the homeowner is supposed to mow. It's on the other side of the sidewalk. Are we allowed to plant something on that area?
I've got my whole natural, my pollinator garden is in that pot. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, you can,
and the city has not come and,
I've had people say, boy, because I have 20-foot tall sunflowers.
are you the house on Broadway? Okay,
Yeah, but they leave me alone. Yeah, so don't.
I think I do.
You have to be, trees and that, you probably have to give permission on certain varieties.
But something like a, just a pollinator garden
Go for it.
or even vegetables.
I think a lot of,
Easily removed.
Gardens, not lawns.
yeah. I think the main thing that I usually tell homeowners who are landscaping and in the area is to stay away from the woodies. Stay away from anything that's not easy to dig up. And also doesn't have roots that are gonna like get into water pipes and stuff. Often that's the city's big concern, and woody taproot and things are the problem. So like pollinator plants, you know, herbaceous things that are, you know, less than 5 feet. Yeah, they call it health strip gardening, actually, like between the street and the sidewalk. One of my favorite, like, there's a very niche group online that loves health strip gardening, so look that up.
You got the book.
Okay, I have a question for Leah. On the rooftop, you're literally right there, the bullseye of downtown Wichita, it's all country. Everything absorbs heat. How much hotter is it at your rooftop garden, say out in the neighborhood where you've got trees and grass? How much hotter is it up on the rooftop? On
I
any
don't
particular day?
know. I don't know the answer to that question. So we just installed a weather station this year. So I should be able to tell you that next year. Anecdotally, some of the people that work for me think that the cement works like a heat sink, and we get some residual heat off that in the winter time. I'm not convinced, however, so we're gonna keep track of temps. Last year, we had a temperature in every row, a thermometer in a soil thermometer in every row. This year, we're going more for a global thing up there. So I don't know the question to that. You know, it does not seem hotter in the summer to me up there. But maybe that's because of the water and the green, you know, they have determined that having the farm there has lowered the heat island index. The city has, or someone, I don't know. So I don't know.
Very good. I'd like to thank everybody that came out. Hang on, we got one more question right here.
And it's for you too.
Yeah.
I don't remember what you called your sprouting chamber.
The germination chamber, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What special conditions do you provide that changes the seed sprouting from 7 to 10 days to 2 days?
Yeah, so the germination chamber that I buy, I have one at both farms. It's made by Phytotronics, which is actually in Topeka, Kansas. And they're used in biology departments all over the US. And what they do is it's warm, moist heat. So the life hack for that a lot of farmers do is they get an old refrigerator and they put a crock pot in the bottom, and that works the same. You have to watch your temp. There's about 3 basic temps that seeds germinate at. So you're
Medium and high.
so it's that warm, moist air that does it. You know, it's just amazing.
And your temperature you're looking for is 70 to 80, or are you talking warmer than that?
No, in fact, there are some at 65. I think 70 is a pretty good bet. But you can Google that. Yeah. There's also a book called Growing Up, which is about rooftop growing, and they talk about the 3 basic root depths, and they talk about the germination depths. So that's a really great book.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. If I could just say, I forgot to say this at the end of my presentation, but Firefly Farm is interviewing for a farm manager this year.
You're looking for a farm manager for a Firefly farm.
Right,
Okay,
so if anybody's interested, please reach out. And I had my, web addresses and stuff, and there's ways that they can reach out there or send a message or.
Any more questions? Thanks for all coming out. Thanks for everybody online. Thank you for the presenters and especially Newton Public Library. Thank you. Good night.